Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm David and this is Ann, and we've been married for 28 years, so we know a little bit about marriage. And we've been teaching natural family planning for 12 years with the Couple to Couple League. Okay. What we're going to go over some of the materials tonight. Father Jerome had asked us to talk about artificial birth control and natural family planning. And so we're using some of the materials that we've helped the Couple to Couple League put together for the Archdiocese, actually, to teach some of the engaged couples and recently married couples about these topics. And we'll spend some time also talking about the difference between NFP and contraceptives.
So, does anyone here think that natural family planning, the practice of natural family planning, might be a kind of marriage insurance? Well, it is the case that the practice of NFP has a very positive effect on many, many couples. And many couples who go from practicing or using contraception to NFP have there's a greater richness and a better marriage.
So these are the topics we're going to talk about tonight. We'll talk about NFP, what it is, our experience, a little bit about the science behind it, some of the different methods that are available to practice natural family planning, its effectiveness. We'll spend some time talking about contraceptives, and then, as I said, the difference between using NFP and contraceptives.
Okay, so what is natural family planning? Natural family planning is a practice of either achieving pregnancy or of avoiding a pregnancy according to an informed awareness of a woman's fertility. Okay, so it's a practice. You can either use it to achieve pregnancy or avoid pregnancy. And it's according to an informed awareness of a woman's fertility. Okay, so basically it is knowledge. It is knowledge. It is knowledge of a woman's fertility. A woman cannot get pregnant every day. Okay, she can only get pregnant for a certain few days out of each cycle.
So it's a very scientific method, and it's 99% effective. And what we teach is how to read the signs of fertility, and then you can identify when the woman may or may not conceive a child. So it's pretty easy.
And effective.
Right, and when you know when you could conceive a child, then you can decide whether or not to abstain if you want to postpone having a child.
Okay, so now we're going to tell you a little bit about our experience and how we came to use it. We started with NFP after we were married 7 years when we learned about NFP and started practicing it. We had 3 children at that time. I used various contraceptives up until that point. I never learned NFP. I was never instructed on it, and unfortunately, I didn't even seek it out. My only knowledge of NFP is what I read in the secular press. Okay, in terms of what the church taught about it. And we got married. I was raised Catholic and was married in the church too. But so that's just where we were. We used contraceptives, but and I was not a regular churchgoer either. Was not a practicing, regular practicing Catholic. But at this point in our marriage, we moved into this new area, and a church was being built. This big Catholic church was being built close by, and that really surprised me. I thought, wow, there must be people go to church. Who are these people? You know, I did not. I was not in Catholic circles. I did not have friends who were Catholic, or if I did have friends who were Catholic, they didn't strike me as being any different than me. I didn't notice really any. So anyway, I noticed this church being built, and I was curious about it, so we would go to church more often, and it was there that I learned specifically that the Catholic Church taught that NFP was the only morally acceptable means to regulate pregnancy, and the contraception was sinful. And in my going to church, I was wanting to return. I was wanting to become a faithful, regular Catholic, but I found that teaching was pretty tough. I didn't understand it. It kind of held me back from like becoming a regular, like fully believing, Catholic. So, I didn't know anybody who used it. Contraception seemed so necessary to me. It seemed like having a car is necessary. I didn't understand what might be wrong with it. So it was pretty tough. So there I was kind of stuck with that, and information was not as readily available today, like with the internet. And so I sort of stewed in this, and frankly, I was afraid to even bring it up to David, because I was in a little bit of hot water for my interest in the church anyway. So, he wasn't too happy about my beginning to go to Mass regularly, and so then I thought, how am I going to bring up this topic of, like, all right, honey, since you're not happy with my going to Mass, I know, let's get rid of our contraception. I honestly did not know how I was even going to bring it. I was really afraid to bring it. I thought it was really going to rock the boat in our marriage. So I just put the whole thing to the side and just kind of wondered about it for many months. And finally, fortunately, I got my first bit of good information about natural family planning on the radio. It was actually National Public Radio. I was listening to the Diane Rehm show, and she's still on the air in the mornings. She interviews people, and she takes call-ins, she takes calls from her listeners. And at this time, she had a physician who she was interviewing, and he was an expert on contraception, and like sort of a super expert. He was an expert, not only a physician, obstetrician, gynecologist, but an expert on statistics, on how different methods of birth control worked on different groups of people, and so on. So he talked for a long time. It was very clear to me he was not a Catholic doctor, okay, because he was just in favor of all kinds of sexual practices that were, I knew that church, I was not an expert on the church, but I knew that it was clear he was not a Catholic doctor. So someone finally called in and asked about natural family planning. And to my surprise, he answered and said it was highly effective. He said it is 99% effective, highly effective, and he said he would only recommend it to a married couple because it requires a certain level of commitment. So I thought, wow, armed with that information, I thought, I'm going to bring it up with my husband now because he loves me and he's reasonable. So I was so happy to have that information. So it enabled me to bring it up, and we enrolled in a class. And to my surprise, he was not unhappy about taking the class.
It's true. It's true. So I really, I guess it was a selfish reason. It was fine when Anne brought it up. It seemed to me that she had just merely found another means of birth control. And so I was like, okay, honey, whatever, let's go to the class. And up until this time, I was pretty sure that whatever the church was teaching was not relevant. I had been raised Catholic, but I had really fallen away in my teens. And so anyway, I had not been catechized well growing up on this topic. But we went to that first class, and I was sitting in the back and just sort of listening. But what struck me was there was just something about that teaching couple that there was just some bond that they had that I now, looking back, I can see there was just this real joyous, loving relationship that they had. So that sort of stuck in my mind about there's something going on here that's a little bit different. I was also really fascinated about the facts about the female body. Anne and I met in engineering school, and I took science classes, but I didn't really know how
we didn't get
people really
instruction
work.
in biology.
So it was fascinating.
More physics.
So the coolest thing, I guess, thinking back now, is that I got sort of distracted during the class, and I went in the back of the room, and there were two little blue booklets on a little rack, little papal encyclicals. You guys have been learning about what papal encyclicals are. When the Pope writes letters to the bishops and to the laity. And I picked up two of these things. One of them was Humanae Vitae, the value of human life, and the other was Familiaris Consortio, the role of the Christian family in the modern world. First by Pope Paul VI, second by Pope John Paul II. And I read them both in one night, that first night. And I was really struck with how beautifully and accurately they described the reality of our marriage and what we've been living for the last 7 years. And I've been searching for these truths, and I read those, and I thought,
wow, the Catholic Church
the
is
Catholic Church is really with it. So it was amazing. So what did I get out of those documents? That my what resonated with me is that my vocation is love. That I give myself totally to my wife. You know, Anne's dad had said to me before we got married, David, marriage is not a 50-50 proposition. It is not. It's 100% zero, 100% zero proposition, where we give ourselves completely to each other, and there's unconditionally. And that's what's in those documents. And that our family's fundamental task is to serve life and to be open to life. And that each child is a precious gift. And that Anne and I cooperate with God to bring a new human person. It's a really awesome gift. And her equal dignity. And to have a profound respect for my wife. So these were the things that I read. And so NFP as a method of regulating children has its real benefits, but also the church's teaching is really beautiful. And it's that class and then practicing NFP is really what brought me back to the faith.
So right away when we started practicing NFP, I was happy with it because I could see, number one, that it worked. That was important. Okay, so it works. And there was nothing bad for my health about it, which was great because everything else did, and I suffered problems with even things that you would think were innocuous. Okay, I mean, they're just, so there was nothing, it was not going to harm my health. And it was essentially free. Okay, we had to pay a fee to take the class, but after that, it's just knowledge, that's it. There's no more, no more cost after that. And you know, I thought that I would, when taking the class, when I went from the contraception to NFP, I figured that everything else in my life would be fine. I'd go from one thing that worked pretty well to something else that worked pretty well, and everything else would be the same. But I found that actually our marriage was richer, and it was better. I found that we had a better, deeper intimacy in our marriage. And we had a good marriage, okay? From this, it's not like we had any kind of trouble in marriage. We had a good marriage to begin with. But, you know, I did notice this better intimacy. And it wasn't like everything was all Pollyanna wonderful at home. I mean, we had 3 children, we were busy. David was still not so sure about the church, so we had this, we still had that disunity of faith that was a challenge for us, really. And so, so even with these difficulties, at least I and I think David, we both experienced this greater intimacy. Because, you know, with contraception, at least the way I see it, I mean, you always have to be on, okay, the marital act. And it's not, sex is a good thing and it's a wonderful thing, but it's supposed to be an outflow, like a consequence, like an outflowing of sincere love. Okay, that's how it's meant to be. But it doesn't, with contraception, it doesn't really work that way. And sometimes I would even feel used. Sometimes, even, you know, married, it would be that way. So sometimes. But with NFP, I noticed that was not so much the case at all. So marital embrace seemed to be much more of a authentic love kind of thing, which is so it was better. And during times of abstinence, I felt like David loved me more, you know, to just respect my body and not, you know, like saying, well, you change yourself so then I can have pleasure. I mean, so I felt like I was more completely loved with the NFP. And it's also made whether or not we were having children a shared responsibility, where, you know, with contraception, it's always sort of my burden. So, and also too, when I look back, I can see that, you know, when I was contracepting, I had sort of a different, it's sort of, the way of life of NFP changed the way I even looked like towards my children. I could see my children more, were more like problems and annoying. Not that I love them, they're wonderful, but you know, they're difficult, you know, they're taxing, and they get me up at night, and I can't do exactly what I want to do all the time when I have these young children. So, and I think the world kind of fosters that. They think, well, you've left your job, you're not working as an engineer now, so you poor thing, you're not being this who you are, you know, with these, the world kind of fosters this notion of antagonism with my kids. But I found when I practiced NFP, my children were more, I could see them more as a real gift and a real fruit of our love. And so, I don't know, it helped kind of put me and my relationship to my children in better order. So I was, I think, tend to be a better mother.
So NFP also fosters better communication between the spouses. It's a shared responsibility, as Ann said, and there's the symptothermal method that we teach provides a few minutes each day when we have to talk about, or we have an opportunity, we don't have to talk about it, but looking back, before we practiced it, I found that we didn't really talk about this really important topic today. With the symptothermal method, the woman takes her temperature first thing in the morning when she wakes up. And then at night, I'll take the thermometer and look at it and record it with a little dot on a chart. We'll show you an example in a minute. But just in those couple of minutes, we're thinking about, gee, here's where we are and whether or not we should be open to having a child. So there's just more intimacy in looking back, where we discuss our family goals more frequently, and it is a shared responsibility. I also found greater intimacy, and even during the periods of abstinence. So I see now that when we were using contraception, we weren't really giving ourselves totally to each other. Instead, I was really using our sexualities selfishly, and I didn't realize it then, but looking back, I can see now that when we were contracepting, that really stood in the way of us truly having an intimate relationship.
So, as I'm realizing all of this, that NFP is good, how silly of me to have not trusted the church all these years, I just started to spread the word to all my friends and neighbors, and well, I thought I was crazy, but spreading the word to people, and then, of course, become certified teachers of natural family planning. And I was angry with my doctors. I put so much trust in my doctors, and they had just pushed so much on me. And one of them was determined to sterilize me. Really, one of them. I mean, the one after my third child. I don't know why, but was very determined. And it's a good thing I did not allow it. So anyway, my sisters. I have two sisters who are physicians, and they tell me that it's just not part of standard medical school instruction. It's just not. And there are physicians out there who are trained in NFP, they're out there, but it's not the majority, of course.
So in closing this part about our experience, NFP has some very positive impacts on our life and our marriage, and I've learned the church teaching, which is beautiful and something we can all be happy about. So that's our experience. And now what we're going to do is we're going to dig more deeply into the science and how NFP really works.
Okay, so this is how NFP works. Women have cycles of fertility, okay? They have cycles, and in one cycle, this pie chart here illustrates one cycle. She has periods of time where she's infertile and where she's fertile. So beginning of her cycle, she starts out in an infertile time, okay? So can I look over here? So the beginning of her cycle is infertile, and partway through, she will notice signs of fertility, and fertility begins. Up and through ovulation. Ovulation is where an egg is released from the ovum. If there's more than one ovulation, it will be right around this time, within 24 hours. And the ovum and the egg is only good. It's only able to be fertilized for about a day, not very long. Okay, and then it dies if it's not fertilized. So this is the fertile time here. And then she has, after ovulation, she has a period of time of infertility. So men, of course, as you must know, men are fertile at all times. That's the easy part. So the signs of fertility change. So for example, with natural family planning, we teach couples, we teach women in particular, to begin to notice something that she probably notices but doesn't pay attention to, something called cervical mucus. So we teach her what to look out for, and when she notices it, she'll record it, and she'll know her times of fertility. Another thing we teach with the method of NFP that David and I teach, we teach the symptothermal method, which includes temperature. So when a woman ovulates, and you see the ovulation mark there on the pie chart, when she ovulates, her temperature always rises. There's a 0.4 degree rise. It's measurable. It's easy to see. So with those signs of fertility, women can observe them and identify them, and you can know, a couple can know with great effectiveness on any day, like every day, whether she's fertile or not on that day. And it's that simple.
That's how it works. So measuring those signs of fertility is how it works. The woman observes and records those signs of fertility on a chart. She and her husband then use that chart and that fertility information on it to define the fertile and the infertile times. And then again, conception is only possible during the fertile time. And then the couple decides if they will abstain or have relations based on their desire to postpone or try to achieve a pregnancy. That's how it works.
Okay. So there are many different methods of natural family planning. They're basically grouped into a few different ways. One group of methods is what's called mucus-only methods. Okay, they are, you can know your fertility with those methods simply by observing mucus alone, and they're very effective. Okay, just the observation of mucus. But you can see listed there Billings, Crichton, and 2-day. Those are 3 different methods of natural family planning. The Crichton method is one that is taught here in Cincinnati, and so you know that. Okay, so the next is symptothermal. It's another grouping, and symptothermal is all of those methods listed are methods that use the observation of mucus and the taking of temperatures. So those are like 2 windows to a woman's fertility instead of just one. Okay, also effective. So and there are a few others. There, the symptothermal, the Marquette model has is mucus observation with the fertility monitor, and the lady comp is like a little computer that's just temperature only, a little computer. Okay, so Crichton method and the couple-to-couple league symptothermal method, which David and I teach, are the 2 most prevalent methods of instruction available here in our area. This is an example of a Crichton chart. Okay, this is one cycle that is charted. You can see there are different colors, and if you can see well, there are little pictures of babies, little stickers of babies. Those are the fertile days there. Okay? And with Crichton, again, a woman is taught, I think it's taught women, for sure it's taught woman to woman, what to observe so she can just know what to put on those days.
And this is an example of a couple-to-couple league symptothermal NFP chart that uses letters and symbols to track mucus and cervix changes and temperatures on the grid that you can see here. And even without taking the class, you guys can probably see that there are generally low temperatures here, and then there are generally high temperatures here. And so we teach how you can determine that you have ovulated, that the temperature rise is evidence of that. And exactly where that you would draw the line is what you would learn in the class. And then things to the right of that line would be the infertile time. And then you also determine the first phase that's infertile. So you would draw a big line here for infertile. You know what your fertile period is,
okay.
And then you know what your infertile is.
And with the question and answer time, it's killing me not to just interpret that chart for you. She
wanted to draw the answer.
I'm going to get up there and just mark the lines.
And it's simple. But there are rules, and that's why there's a class for it. Okay, there's also an app for that. So for people who don't like to draw things and lose their newspaper, and we finally have our smartphones.
This is one reason why I really wanted to get a smartphone.
Okay, so you can enter it in, and
well, later I'll show you. Yeah, I see.
And actually, there are other cool things. Right. So there are monitoring devices, desktop software, online charting, handheld mobile apps that are available, and the only thing that we would caution you is to make sure that whatever you get is backed by a solid organization,
right.
Because there are some things out there that don't actually link to these methods. Okay, so be careful about that.
Okay, so all of this is great, but does NFP work?
That's the question.
Does it work?
So most couples are concerned about the effectiveness of the birth control method that they choose, and there are several peer-reviewed studies published in premier journals that show that NFP in general is effective, and the two methods that are readily available here in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati have definitely been proven to be very effective. So the fact is that NFP is as effective or more effective than contraceptives. And that's what's shown here on this chart.
Okay, so now we're going to go to, we're going to switch over and talk about contraceptives and some of the problems with them. Okay, so there are four basic categories. First is hormonal, and that would be the birth control pill or hormonal patches, barrier methods, the IUD, which, as you probably know, is a piece of wire. It's inserted into the uterus that just stays there in the woman's uterus, and it's to prevent implantation. Sometimes they have hormones embedded in them as well to help to suppress ovulation as well, but they primarily work as an abortifacient. And sterilization. Okay, so now we're going to provide some more details on hormonal contraceptives. Okay, so hormonal contraceptives, what they do is they put into your body artificial hormones. Okay, progestins, not a natural progesterone, but they put in artificial, man-made hormones into your system, and they would fool your reproductive system. Okay, to thinking that you don't need to ovulate. It's meant to fool your reproductive system. So the word contraception means contra, or against conceiving a baby. And that is the principal mechanism, the principal purpose of hormonal contraception. Okay, so the primary thing is to suppress ovulation, okay, the primary mechanism. Another contraceptive action that occurs with hormonal contraceptive is to thicken the cervical mucus. What that does is it slows sperm migration, okay, it makes conception less likely because it thickens the mucus. The third contraceptive action is to slow the movement of the fallopian tubes. Okay, now sometimes with hormonal contraception, ovulation is not suppressed. Okay, it doesn't always suppress ovulation. Sometimes they have what's called breakthrough ovulation does occur. Okay, that happens. So hormonal contraceptives are also designed, and they work to prevent implantation. Okay, that's how they work. They don't always prevent ovulation and conception. Sometimes they work to prevent. And how does it prevent implantation? Well, when you take hormonal contraceptives, the lining of the uterus normally will get built up with a thick kind of blood supply, but when you're on hormonal contraceptives, the lining of the uterus stays very thin, and it makes it difficult or impossible for a new embryo to implant. Okay. So, and this is written on the labels. It's AFDA requires these things on the labels. So if you get your pill, you can read it. You can read it right on the medications themselves. So this chart here shows us, it illustrates how often breakthrough ovulation occurs with some different kinds of hormonal contraception. So my reading here at the bottom, it's 75% of the time breakthrough ovulation happens. With progestin-only birth control pills, 33 to 65% of the time breakthrough ovulation occurs. And with the combined pill, 28%. So the bottom line is hormonal contraceptives do sometimes prevent conception, but if that fails, they work also as abortifacients. So that's one bit on hormonal contraceptives. Hormonal contraceptives also has some negative health side effects as well. So, and very often women discontinue them because of that. So 63%, according to the Center for Disease Control's National Survey of Family Growth in 2010, 63% of women in the United States who discontinue hormonal contraceptives within the first year do so because of side effects. And another 12% discontinue in the first year for the fear of side effects. So there are some serious side effects like heart disease, the increased risk of blood clots and strokes, and the birth control pill and hormonal contraceptives put a woman at an increased risk for breast cancer. And it's funny because in my experience, that's not something that the doctors told me about when they were offering me the pill. Okay, they just were not. But when you go in for a mammogram, then they tell you. They tell you then, it's written clearly, that's one of the puts you at high risk. So, you know, and there are some other